The first gunshot echoed through the empty plains of West Texas. 1878, as Harriet Vance clutched her father's blood-stained pocket watch and ran. The family ranch, her home for all her 22 years, vanished into the distance behind her, now nothing more than a smoking ruin claimed by the Sutton gang. They'd taken everything: the cattle, the horses, even her parents' lives. All for the crime of refusing to sell land that had been in the Vance family since before the war. The unforgiving summer sun beat down as Harriet stumbled across the parched earth. Her silk dress, once the pride of her modest wardrobe, was torn and filthy, hardly suitable for fleeing across the open terrain. But there had been no time to change, no time to gather provisions when the gang had come at dawn. She'd escaped with only the clothes on her back, her father's watch, and the small Derringer pistol her mother had pressed into her hand before urging her to run. 3 days had passed. 3 days of walking, hiding, and surviving on what little water she could find in shallow creek beds. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her throat so dry it felt like sandpaper. The small town of Redemption was still at least 2 days' walk away if she could keep going that long. As darkness fell on the third night, Harriet collapsed beneath the sparse shelter of a lone mesquite tree. The cold desert night settled around her as she huddled against the trunk, trying to conserve what little body heat remained after the scorching day. Her stomach cramped violently from hunger, and tears stung her eyes. "They said I would starve alone out here," she whispered to the empty wilderness, her voice breaking. "My father always said a woman couldn't survive these lands without a man to protect her. Now I fear he was right." "Then they've never met my fire," a deep voice replied from the darkness. Harriet gasped, fumbling for her Derringer as a tall figure approached from the shadows. In the faint moonlight, she made out the silhouette of a man leading a horse. The brim of his hat was pulled low, but she could see the gleam of his eyes studying her. "Stay back," she warned, raising the small pistol with trembling hands. The stranger stopped, raising his hand slowly. "Easy now, I mean no harm. Name's Vincent Prescott. Most folks just call me Vince." "How do I know you're not with the Sutton gang?" she demanded, keeping the pistol trained on him despite her shaking hands. "Don't know any Suttons," he replied calmly. "I'm just a rancher passing through, spotted your campfire from a ways back." "I don't have a campfire," Harriet said. Vincent chuckled softly. "No, you don't." "That's partly what concerned me. Night like this, a person ought to have a fire." He slowly reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a canteen. "You look like you could use some water, miss." Harriet's eyes fixed on the canteen, her thirst overwhelming her caution. When he tossed it gently toward her, she caught it one-handed, the Derringer never wavering in her other hand. "Go ahead," he encouraged. "I've got plenty more." The cool water was heaven against her parched throat. She drank deeply, forcing herself to stop before she made herself sick. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little stronger now. Vincent nodded and began gathering kindling. "Mind if I build that fire now? Texas nights get cold, even in summer." Harriet hesitated, then nodded, watching as his skilled hands quickly built and lit a small campfire. The flames illuminated his features. A strong jaw darkened with several days' growth of beard, sharp cheekbones, and eyes the color of weathered leather. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense, his face too rugged, too shaped by sun and wind, but there was something compelling about him. Something solid. "So," he said, settling across the fire from her, "you want to tell me why a lady in a torn silk dress is wandering alone in one of the most unforgiving stretches of Texas?" Harriet lowered the Derringer but kept it in her lap. "The Sutton gang. They wanted our land. When my father refused to sell, her voice caught. They burned everything, killed my parents, I barely escaped. Vincent's face hardened. The Suttons heard of them, bad business. He studied her across the flames. You have somewhere to go, redemption. My aunt lives there. Or at least she did, last I heard. It's been years since we've had word, he nodded thoughtfully. That's a hard journey on foot, especially for someone not used to the terrain. I was managing, Harriet said defensively. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Sure you were. That's why you were having a conversation with yourself about starving alone. Harriet felt heat rise to her cheeks. I was just thinking aloud. Well, Miss Vance, Harriet Vance. Well, Miss Vance, you don't have to make that journey alone. I'm headed in that direction myself. Could use the company. Harriet studied him warily. Why would you help a stranger? Vincent stared into the fire for a long moment. Out here, refusing help is as good as signing a death warrant. My pa taught me that. Besides, he added with a slight smile, it's not like I'm offering charity. You can earn your keep. I'm not that kind of woman, Harriet said sharply. Vincent's eyebrows shot up, and then he laughed, a rich, genuine sound that seemed to chase away some of the night's chill. I meant cooking and keeping watch, Miss Vance. I've been eating my own trail cooking for too long. A change would be welcome. Embarrassment flooded Harriet's face. Oh, I apologize for assuming. No offense taken. In your situation, caution is wise. He pulled a strip of jerky from his pocket and offered it to her. Hungry. The food was tough and salty, but to Harriet, it tasted better than any fine meal she'd ever had. As she ate, Vincent told her about his small ranch north of Redemption, modest compared to what her family had owned, but successful enough to keep him comfortable. He'd been to Fort Worth selling cattle and was now heading home. What about you? He asked. What sort of life were you living before the Suttons came? Harriet looked into the flames, memories washing over her. My father built one of the largest ranches in the county. We weren't wealthy like the big cattle barons, but we did well. Mother taught me to read and write, to appreciate literature and music. Father taught me to ride and shoot, though clearly not well enough. She glanced down at the derringer. I never thought I'd need those skills to survive. Most of us don't prepare for the worst until it finds us, Vincent said quietly. Something in his tone made her look up. You sound like you're speaking from experience. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. War has a way of teaching those lessons. I rode with Terry's Texas Rangers during the late unpleasantness. He didn't elaborate further, and Harriet didn't press. They slept on opposite sides of the fire that night. Despite her exhaustion, Harriet kept waking, startled by unfamiliar sounds, the distant howl of coyotes, the soft nickering of Vincent's horse, the endless whisper of wind through the scrub. Each time, she would see Vincent's silhouette, sometimes sleeping, sometimes sitting upright, keeping watch. For the first time in days, she felt something besides terror and grief. Something like hope. Morning came with a spectacular sunrise painting the eastern horizon in shades of gold and crimson. Vincent was already awake, brewing coffee in a battered tin pot. Hope you don't mind riding double, he said, handing her a cup. Storm here can handle both of us until we can find you a mount of your own. The coffee was strong and bitter, but the warmth and caffeine revived her spirits. I can't ask you to share your horse. You didn't ask, I offered. He gestured toward the horizon. 2 days on foot or half a day riding, the choice seemed simple enough. Harriet couldn't argue with his logic. After a breakfast of more jerky and hard biscuits, Vincent helped her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. The proximity was unsettling. She could feel the solid warmth of his chest against her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. Uncomfortable? He asked as she stiffened. Just unused to such closeness with a stranger, she admitted. "Well, we've got a few hours to remedy that stranger part," he said easily. "By the time we reach redemption, you'll know enough about Vincent Prescott to write my obituary, should the need arise." True to his word, Vincent talked as they rode. He told her about growing up on a small farm in East Texas, about joining the Confederate cavalry at 18, about wandering for years after the war before finally settling on his modest ranch. He spoke of cattle drives and blizzards, of drought and flood, of all the thousand natural calamities that could befall a rancher in this unforgiving land. "And yet you stay," Harriet observed. She felt rather than saw his shrug. "There's freedom here you can't find elsewhere. Room to breathe. Room to build something that's truly yours. If others don't take it from you," she said bitterly, thinking of her family's ranch. Vincent was quiet for a moment. "Some men think might makes right, that they can take whatever they want because they have the guns and the numbers." "Men like the Suttons. Men like the Suttons," he agreed. "But this country's changing. Laws coming, even to places like this. Men like that their days are numbered." "That doesn't help my parents," Harriet said softly. Vincent's arms tightened slightly around her, not an embrace, just a gentle pressure that somehow conveyed understanding. "No, it doesn't, and I'm sorry for that." They stopped around midday to rest the horse and eat. Harriet found herself studying Vincent as he checked Storm's hooves and gave the animal water. His movements were efficient and practiced, his manner with the horse gentle despite his rugged appearance. "You're staring, Miss Vance," he said without looking up. Harriet flushed. "I was just thinking. Dangerous pastime." He straightened up, a half-smile playing at his lips. "Care to share these thoughts? I was wondering why a man like you would go so far out of his way to help someone like me." Vincent considered her question, his eyes serious now. "What kind of man would I be if I left a woman alone in the wilderness?" "Many would," Harriet countered. "Most would." "Then I'm not most men." He handed her the canteen. "Besides, maybe I was getting tired of talking to my horse." They reached a small creek in the late afternoon. Vincent decided they would camp there for the night rather than pushing on to redemption. "Better to arrive in daylight," he explained. "Towns can be dangerous after dark, especially for a woman traveling with a stranger." While Vincent tended to Storm, Harriet gathered firewood. The physical activity felt good after hours in the saddle. As she worked, she caught herself humming a tune her mother used to sing and then stopped abruptly, overcome by a wave of grief. "You have a nice voice," Vincent said, appearing beside her with an armful of kindling. "Why'd you stop?" Harriet blinked back tears. "It was my mother's favorite song." Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Grief's a strange thing. Sometimes the smallest things, a song, a smell, a certain slant of light, can bring it all rushing back. You sound like you know. Lost my whole family in '67. Yellow fever." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "You don't ever stop missing them, but you learn to carry it, and eventually remembering brings more comfort than pain." "I'm not sure I believe that," Harriet said. "You will, in time." That night, they bathed in the creek, Vincent upstream, Harriet downstream, each giving the other privacy. The cool water was blissful against Harriet's skin, washing away days of dust and sweat. She even managed to rinse some of the dirt from her dress, though it remained torn and bedraggled. When she returned to camp, her hair still damp, Vincent had prepared a more substantial meal than jerky beans, salt pork, and even a couple of biscuits he'd saved. "This is a feast," she said, accepting the tin plate he offered. "Don't get too excited. My cooking would make a chuck wagon cook weep." But the hot food was delicious after days of near starvation, and Harriet ate every bite. Afterward, they sat by the fire, listening to the night sounds of the Texas wilderness. "Tomorrow we'll be in redemption," Vincent said. What will you do if your aunt isn't there? The question had been haunting Harriet since they'd set out. I don't know, she admitted. I have no money, no possessions beyond this dress and my father's watch. You have skills, Vincent pointed out. You're educated, you can read and write. That's valuable in a frontier town. Perhaps I could teach, Harriet mused, or work as a clerk in a store. Vincent nodded. Options exist, you won't starve. Unless I'm alone again, she said without thinking. His eyes met hers across the fire. You planning on being alone? The question hung in the air between them, laden with meaning Harriet wasn't sure she was ready to address. I should get some sleep, she said finally, breaking eye contact. Vincent didn't press. Good idea. We'll start early tomorrow. Redemption appeared on the horizon shortly before noon the next day, a cluster of wooden buildings rising from the flat landscape like an island in a sea of grass and scrub. As they approached, Harriet felt both relief and trepidation. What if her aunt was gone? What if she was unwelcome? The town was larger than she remembered from her childhood visits, a proper main street now lined with businesses, a church steeple rising above the rooftops, even a two-story hotel with a freshly painted sign. Progress comes even to the frontier, Vincent remarked, following her gaze. Town's grown since I was here last. They drew curious stares as they rode down the main street, a rugged cowboy and a woman in a torn silk dress sharing a horse. Vincent ignored the looks, guiding Storm toward a whitewashed building with a neatly tended garden. The widow Thornton, he explained. If anyone knows where to find your aunt, it would be her. Mrs. Thornton knows everyone's business in Redemption. Mrs. Thornton proved to be a tiny woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, but her face softened with sympathy when Harriet explained her situation. Margaret Vance, she said, frowning thoughtfully. Yes, I remember her. Lived on the edge of town in that blue house with the picket fence, but she's been gone these 2 years, child. Moved east to live with her daughter in St. Louis after her health failed. Harriet's heart sank. I see, thank you for telling me. Mrs. Thornton studied her keenly. You've nowhere to go then? No, madam. The older woman nodded decisively. Well, you'll stay with me tonight. I've a spare room and you look like you could use a proper bath and meal. As for your future. She glanced at Vincent, who stood silently by the door. We'll figure something out. Redemption takes care of its own. She's not exactly its own, Vincent pointed out. She's Margaret's niece. Close enough. Mrs. Thornton shooed them inside. Now, Mr. Prescott, you can wait in the parlor while I see to Miss Vance. You look like you could use refreshment yourself. The bath was heavenly hot water, real soap and privacy in which to soak her aching muscles. Mrs. Thornton had even provided a clean dress, slightly old-fashioned but blessedly intact. It was my daughter's, she explained when Harriet thanked her. She's in Denver now with her husband, has no use for such plain garments anymore. Clean and properly dressed for the first time in days, Harriet felt more like herself as she joined Vincent and Mrs. Thornton for a late lunch. Their hostess had prepared a veritable feast: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread. I always cook too much, she said, waving away Harriet's thanks. Now, eat up while we discuss your situation. Between bites of the best meal she'd had in memory, Harriet explained about the Sutton gang's attack and her flight across the wilderness. Mrs. Thornton's face darkened. Those Suttons are a plague. Sheriff's been trying to bring them in for months, but they're slippery as eels, always one step ahead. Do they still have my family's land? Harriet asked. Last I heard, they'd moved their operation there, Mrs. Thornton confirmed. Using your father's ranch as their headquarters now. The thought made Harriet's stomach turn. She put down her fork, appetite suddenly gone. As for your future, Mrs. Thornton continued, I've been thinking. The school's in need of a teacher. Our last one left to get married 3 months ago. The town council's been looking for a replacement, someone educated with good moral character. Harriet blinked in surprise. You think they would consider me? I'm on the council, dear, and I'm very persuasive. Mrs. Thornton smiled. We could offer room and board plus a small salary. Not much, but enough to live on while you decide what you really want. The unexpected opportunity left Harriet speechless. After days of desperation, to be offered a respectable position and a place to stay seemed almost too good to believe. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Vincent suggested quietly. It's a good offer. Teaching suits you. Harriet glanced at him, surprised. How would you know what suits me? You're patient, observant, quick to learn. He shrugged. Seems like teacher qualities to me. Mrs. Thornton looked between them with shrewd eyes. Mr. Prescott, what are your plans? Staying in town long? Just passing through, he said. My ranch is a day's ride north. Been away too long already. Something like disappointment flickered in Harriet's chest, though she quickly suppressed it. What had she expected? That this stranger who'd saved her life would somehow remain in it. Well, Mrs. Thornton said briskly, at least stay for dinner. I'm making apple pie. After lunch, Mrs. Thornton insisted on resting, leaving Harriet and Vincent alone on the front porch. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street as they sat in comfortable silence. Thank you, Harriet said finally, for everything. I would have died out there without your help. Vincent shook his head. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You might have made it on your own. We both know that's not true. Maybe, maybe not. He looked at her directly. What will you do about the Suttons, about your family's ranch? The question caught her off guard. What can I do? They're armed men, killers. The law has been trying to catch them for months without success, she finished for him. No, Mr. Prescott, I'm not a fool. My parents are dead. The ranch is gone. I need to build a new life now. Vincent studied her for a long moment. And teaching will make you happy. Happy. Harriet hadn't considered happiness. It will keep me alive, give me purpose. That's enough for now. Is it? Before she could answer, Mrs. Thornton's front door opened and a tall man in a sheriff's badge stepped onto the porch. Heard we had visitors, he said, nodding to them both. Sheriff James Wilcox. Vincent stood to shake the man's hand. Vincent Prescott, the rancher from up north, the sheriff acknowledged. And you must be Harriet Vance. His expression grew somber. Mrs. Thornton told me about what happened to your family. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, Sheriff, Harriet said quietly. I've been after the Suttons for nearly a year now, he continued. Slippery bunch, always one step ahead, but they're getting bolder and that makes them careless. He looked at Harriet intently. I don't suppose you'd be willing to testify against them. If we catch them, I would, she said without hesitation. I saw their faces, I could identify them. The sheriff nodded. Good, that might help build our case. He turned to Vincent. You heading back to your place tomorrow, planning to? Mind if I ride along? Got some business up that way, and I'd appreciate the company. Vincent raised an eyebrow but nodded. Fine by me. After the sheriff left, Harriet found herself struggling with conflicting emotions. The practical part of her knew that staying in redemption, accepting the teaching position, was the sensible choice. But another part she'd barely acknowledged rebelled at the thought of Vincent riding away tomorrow, perhaps never to be seen again. You're thinking too hard again, Vincent observed, just processing everything. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Life can change direction in an instant out here. One day you're on a regular cattle drive, the next you're rescuing a woman in a torn silk dress. Is that how you see it? A rescue? Vincent considered the question. At first maybe. Now, he shook his head. Now I see it as the day I met a woman too stubborn to die alone in the wilderness, a woman with fire in her eyes even when she was half dead from thirst. The compliment warmed her more than it should have. I wasn't very impressive when you found me. You'd survived 3 days alone with no provisions in some of the harshest country in Texas, he countered. Most men couldn't have done that, let alone most women. Before she could respond, Mrs. Thornton called them in for dinner, another splendid meal followed by the promised apple pie. As they ate, their hostess regaled them with tales of Redemption's colorful history, from its founding by a repentant gambler to its current status as a growing frontier town. "We even have a proper hotel now," she said proudly. "And a bank. Next year they're talking about bringing the railroad through." "Progress," Vincent murmured, not sounding entirely approving. "The world changes whether we like it or not, Mr. Prescott," Mrs. Thornton said. "Best to change with it." After dinner, Harriet excused herself early, exhausted by the events of the past few days. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a real feather bed and clean linens. Yet despite her fatigue, sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to Vincent, to his quiet strength, his unexpected kindness, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Tomorrow he would ride away with the sheriff, back to his ranch. She would stay in Redemption, build a new life, try to forget the horror of watching her parents die and her home burn. It was the sensible path. So why did it feel like she was making a terrible mistake? Morning came too soon. Harriet dressed in her borrowed clothes and went downstairs to find Vincent already awake, drinking coffee with Mrs. Thornton in the kitchen. "Sheriff stopped by," he said when she entered. "He's meeting me at the livery in an hour." "So soon?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Vincent nodded, something unreadable in his expression. "Ranch won't run itself." Mrs. Thornton looked between them and discreetly excused herself, muttering something about garden work. Alone in the kitchen, Harriet struggled to find the right words. "I want to thank you again, for everything." "You already thanked me. It bears repeating." Vincent stood, setting his coffee cup aside. "I should go. Storm needs saddling and I need to pick up some supplies. Of course." Disappointment settled in Harriet's chest, though she maintained her composure. "I wish you safe travels." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "My ranch. The location, in case you ever need anything." Harriet took the paper, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Thank you." Vincent moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back to face her. "Teaching will suit you fine," he said. "You'll be good at it. The children will love you. You'll have a respectable life here." "Yes," she agreed. "It's a wonderful opportunity." "But it's not what you want, is it?" The directness of the question took her breath away. I don't know what I want anymore." Vincent took a step closer. "Yes, you do. You want justice. You want your home back. You want to look the men who killed your parents in the eye and watch them face consequences." Harriet's heart pounded. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Vincent's eyes were intense now. "What if I told you the sheriff didn't just want company on the ride? What if I told you we're gathering men, good men, lawful men, to finally take down the Sutton gang? What? They've gone too far. Murdering a respected rancher and his wife, taking over their property, it's crossed a line. The governor's authorized a special posse. We ride next week." Hope and fear warred in Harriet's chest. "And the sheriff told you this?" "That's why he's riding with me, to ask for my help and my men. I've got good cowboys who know how to handle themselves." "What does this have to do with me?" Harriet asked, though she already suspected the answer. "You're a witness. You can identify them, and—" he hesitated. "It's your home they've stolen, your parents they murdered. Seems to me you have more right than anyone to see justice done." The possibility left her breathless. You're suggesting I join this posse, a woman. No, the fighting's men's work as much as you might not like hearing that, but afterward. He met her eyes steadily. Afterward, when the law has done its job, someone will need to reclaim that ranch, rebuild it. Me, alone. The very thought was overwhelming. Vincent's expression softened. Not necessarily alone. The implication hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Mr. Prescott, Harriet began carefully, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that in the short time I've known you, I've come to admire you greatly, he said. Your courage, your resilience, your fire. I'm suggesting that I'd like to know you better. And yes, I'm suggesting that perhaps if you were amenable, I might help you rebuild that ranch of yours. We barely know each other, Harriet protested, even as her heart raced. True enough. But I've always been a good judge of character. He smiled slightly. Besides, Mrs. Thornton was right about one thing: the world changes whether we like it or not. Sometimes change comes slow as molasses. And sometimes it happens in an instant, when you're staring at a half-starved woman under a mesquite tree who still has enough spirit to point a derringer at you. Despite everything, Harriet found herself smiling. You're a very unusual man, Vincent Prescott. So I've been told. He grew serious again. I'm not offering marriage, Harriet, not yet. That would be presumptuous. I'm offering partnership, help reclaiming what's yours. And time to see if what I'm feeling might be something you could eventually share. It was madness, complete madness to even consider abandoning the safe, respectable life Mrs. Thornton had arranged in favor of this wild uncertainty. And yet, what if I said yes? She asked softly. What happens then? Then you stay here with Mrs. Thornton until we deal with the Suttons. After that, if you still want to, you come to my ranch. See if ranching life suits you. See if I suit you. His mouth quirked in a half-smile. No commitments beyond that. If you decide teaching's your calling after all, redemption will still need a schoolmistress. It was the most reckless, irrational decision of Harriet's life. Yet somehow it felt right in a way that nothing had since her parents' deaths. Yes, she said simply. Vincent's smile was like sunrise breaking across the plains. Yes, yes to all of it, to waiting for justice, to trying ranching life, to seeing if we suit. He took her hand then, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. You won't regret this, Harriet Vance. I'd better not, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Or I'll remind you that I know how to use that derringer. Vincent laughed, the sound rich and warm. There's that fire I was talking about. Epilogue. 2 years later, the summer sunset painted the rebuilt Vance Ranch house in hues of gold and amber as Harriet stood on the porch, watching Vincent ride in from checking the northern pastures. In the distance, cattle grazed peacefully, the beginning of their new herd, built from the combined resources of their 2 ranches. So much had changed in 2 years. The Sutton gang was gone, most hanged, the rest serving long prison sentences. The ranch was rebuilt, better than before. And 3 months ago, Harriet Vance had become Harriet Prescott in a simple ceremony in Redemption's white clapboard church. As Vincent dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post, Harriet smiled, her hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. She had news for him today, news that would change their lives yet again. You're looking mighty pleased with yourself, Mrs. Prescott, Vincent called as he climbed the porch steps. I have reason to be, she replied, accepting his kiss. How are the cattle? Thriving. That new grassland to the north is exactly what we needed. He studied her face. But that's not what has you glowing like that. What are you hiding? Harriet took his hand and placed it gently against her abdomen. Not hiding, growing. Vincent's eyes widened, understanding dawning. Are you saying? She nodded, joy bubbling up inside her. Come spring, there will be 3 of us on this ranch. His whoop of delight echoed across the plains as he swept her into his arms, spinning her in a circle before setting her carefully back on her feet. A baby, he said in wonder. Our baby. The next generation of Prescotts, Harriet confirmed, to carry on what we've built here. Vincent's hand cradled her face tenderly. When I found you under that mesquite tree, I never imagined this. When you found me, I thought I had nothing left, Harriet admitted. Now I have everything. As the last light of day gilded the land around them, their land, hard-won and precious, Vincent drew his wife close. Remember what you said that night, he asked softly. About starving alone, Harriet smiled up at him. And I remember what you said about your fire. Turns out we were both right, Vincent murmured against her hair. Your strength, my determination. Together, we've built something neither of us could have alone. As darkness settled over the Texas plains, the lights of the ranch house glowed warm and inviting, a beacon of home, of family, of a future neither of them could have imagined on that fateful night beneath a lone mesquite tree, when a starving woman with nothing left to lose met a cowboy with fire enough for both of them.